Before we get started, just a couple of quick housekeeping items. First, today's webinar is designed to be interactive for our attendees, so we will be posting a few polling questions as we go, as well as the results from audience feedback. At the end of the presentation, when you exit the webinar, there will also be a short survey. Your feedback is important to us, so please take a minute to let us know how we are doing. We also welcome any and all questions, so please just enter any you may have in the chat field that should be visible on the right side of your screen, and we will answer them at the end of the presentation. Lastly, we will be recording this webinar and will send you the link in a follow-up email. With that, let's go ahead and get started with a couple of quick introductions. I am Amy Marasso, Product Marketing Manager for Printing Solutions, Labels and Tags with Lowry Solutions. Joining me today is David Kane, Product Manager and part of TEKLYNX Development and Enhancement Team. Dave is a GS1 certified and brings over 18 years of industry experience to us. Also is Dean Ludwig, the Director of Engineering Ideation at Zebra Technologies. With 20 years at Zebra, his extensive involvement in the Produce Traceability Initiative, we are pleased to have him joining us today. Thank you both for being here. On our agenda today, we're going to go over the basics of the PTI, or Produce Traceability Initiative, for those of you that are still new to it. Are you compliant? What you can do to prepare for it, and the risks if you don't comply. We'll then open it up for questions and answers at the end of the presentation. So Dave, would you like to go ahead and get started?
Sure thing, and thank you, Amy, for that very kind introduction. Again, my name is David Kane. I am the Product Manager for Label Design Software. 1 second here. It looks like you may have tried to send me the presentation, so I'm just going to send it right back over to you here, Amy.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm going to go ahead and you should have controls now.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. All right, again, my name is David Kane. I'm the Product Manager for Label Design Products for TEKLYNX International, the industry leader for label design software. TEKLYNX has been at the forefront of the PTI since its inception, and initiatives like the PTI require suppliers to adhere to some pretty stringent guidelines, which TEKLYNX really strives to offer solutions that will allow for the simple and efficient compliance with those guidelines. And as the PTI, as well as any other initiatives, continue to evolve, TEKLYNX will continue to be there as a solution provider. So to kick things off here, I'd like to start out with a simple polling question, which I'm just going to real quick go ahead and pull up on screen here. All right. And what we're looking to learn here is how familiar are you with the PTI? We got about 3 different options here: low, medium, and high. Well, we're really just trying to get a better understanding of where the group sits right now as far as an understanding of the PTI. So just give it another minute or two here as the results continue to come in. So just give it a couple more seconds. All right, looks like we've got a decent percentage here, so I'll go ahead and close it out here and share the results on screen. All right, looks like a pretty even distribution between medium and low, and that's really not all that surprising. There hasn't been a whole lot of attention drawn to the Produce Traceability Initiative, and so it's not that unexpected that you wouldn't be that familiar with it. Now, there has been some growing support recently for the initiative by some pretty major retailers, and we're really encouraging everyone to use this webinar as a learning tool to help prepare you for any demands that the PTI will no doubt be pressing on you soon by your buyers. So let me go ahead and close that out here. We can move on. Okay. Sometimes there's a little bit of a delay here in me taking control, so okay, there we go. All right, so to get things rolling here, we're going to roll right into a brief introduction to the PTI. And to start, the PTI is essentially a response to some growing demands and industry trends in food manufacturing. The PTI has really started gaining momentum recently thanks to some help from the backing of some pretty major retailers. A real notable one being Walmart, who in late May of last year distributed a letter notifying all of its suppliers that they would be required to provide a very specific case label that complies with the PTI guidelines. Now, they set a deadline of January 1st of this year, which, as you can probably tell, has come and gone. And considering their public statement of start working on the transition yesterday, it's pretty clear Walmart is approaching the PTI with a pretty strong sense of urgency. So compliance with the PTI is really more important than ever. Now, there's a whole variety of risks and rewards to PTI compliance, and the most obvious risk being that of returned shipments and, of course, the lost revenue associated with those returns. Rewards, on the other hand, are presenting themselves in the form of elevated consumer confidence through an increase in supply chain transparency. So really, the entire initiative is founded on consumer confidence. So get this slide to move on here. Oh, come on. There we go. All right. So what is the Produce Traceability Initiative, the PTI? Well, while the PTI is made up of many aspects, compliance can really be broken down into 3 steps. The first of which is an understanding and progressing through the 7 milestones to PTI implementation. And the milestones can really be considered just that, a progression, which is why we have this nice visual of an arrow. So the first milestone that we come to is obtaining a company prefix. A company prefix is something that's obtained through GS1 US, and it identifies your company really on a global scale. It's also used to link together all the other numbers that are on your label and link those numbers to your company. So once we have a company prefix, we can go ahead and move on to the next milestone, which is to start assigning global trade item numbers, also referred to as GTINs or GTINs. Now, GTINs are assigned to every case that you label, and they really consist of a package indicator, a company prefix, which is what we were just discussing, a case reference number, and then a check digit, which is really just used for error correction. Now, GTINs are also a very major component of voice pick codes, which are another vital aspect of the PTI, and we'll touch on that a little bit later. So once we've assigned those GTINs, we'll need to provide those GTINs to our buyers, which also happens to be the next milestone here. So now, we not only need to be providing the GTINs for the products, but we also need to we have to provide any data associated with those products. Buyers need this information so they themselves can comply with the track and trace requirements for the PTI. And buyers will be using this data in conjunction with the labels that you'll be providing on your cases. And the next milestone refers to providing human readable information on those case labels. The PTI requires that the GTIN and a batch or lot number be listed in human readable form on the label, which in other words means text. The GTIN and a batch or lot number have to be listed in text form on the label. Now, it doesn't really stop there. You know, text is great, but a barcode is even better. Oh, looks like I lost control here. 1 second. Trying to get the slide to progress. There we go. All right, so a barcode's even better. The same GTIN and batch or lot number information have to be encoded in a barcode, specifically a GS1 128 barcode. And that barcode standard is selected because of its compatibility with most warehouse scanners and systems. So if you have a warehouse scanner, chances are it's going to be able to read that barcode just fine. With that, finally we come to the last 2 milestones, which kind of go hand in hand. In compliance with the traceability portion of the PTI, you'll need to be scanning and storing the information on all incoming and outgoing cases. The information must then be stored in a business system of some sort so it can be referenced whenever needed. So while that may be a lot of information to take in, it's vital that all these milestones are understood completely before moving on to the next steps. Now, the next step being a detailed review of your existing labeling process. Now, it's important to review all aspects of your current process to determine if any changes or adjustments are necessary. And while your current label designs may contain some of the PTI components, you have to ensure that all of the required elements are addressed. So to review, a PTI compliant label must contain a GTIN, and a batch or lot number, both of those being listed in a human readable form and a barcode form. Then there also has to be a pack or sell-by date listed on the label. That has to be in just human readable form. And then there also has to be a voice pick code, which we talked about a little earlier. But to detail a voice pick code a bit further, a voice pick code is the result of a specific calculation that takes in the GTIN, a batch or lot number, and a pack or sell-by date, and results in a specific 2 or 4-digit number, which is then used for identification purposes in a voice pick inventory system. And those systems essentially replace a barcode scanner with a voice recognition system. So having the ability to add this information to your labels and do so in a quick and easy manner is really vital to labeling efficiency, but more importantly, PTI compliance. And of course, doing this means choosing the right labeling software. And when analyzing a new labeling software purchase or a relevant upgrade, you want to keep in mind that the relative low cost of a solution that helps efficiently meet the PTI regulations really pales in comparison to the risk of lost revenue from those return shipments. Also, you want to be sure to keep any future needs in mind. Because we all know your business is sure to grow, be sure to be selecting an application that will continue to grow along with your business. And remember, voice pick codes are not a standard feature for most label design applications, so keep that functionality front of mind when considering an application. So, that is the PTI in a nutshell. So now we want to talk about how you can prepare for the PTI from a solution standpoint. A full PTI solution is made up of 3 major areas. To start, we have software, which is represented here today by myself and TEKLYNX. And when selecting a software, you'll want to choose one that can not only create the compliant label designs that are demanded by the PTI, but can do so in as efficient a manner as possible. Next, we have hardware, which is represented today by Dean and Zebra Technologies. Dean will be able to touch on this in a bit more detail in a moment, but generally, you want to ensure that hardware is selected that is capable of producing the quality human-readable and machine-readable output that's demanded. Output speed is, of course, always a vital component, and for some, color may be of interest. Finally, we have consumables and services. That's represented today by Amy and Lowry Computer Products. Again, Amy will be able to delve into this a bit more detail, but generally, when talking about consumables, we're talking about labels. And labels that are used in the PTI are often subjected to a whole variety of environments, elements, and temperatures. So when you're selecting a media, it's important to select one that can not only create labels that look great, but can also withstand the elements they're no doubt going to be subjected to. Also, having a great service provider to help advise as such doesn't really hurt either. So, all right, let's take a break here for another moment and do one more of these polling questions. We talked about voice pick codes there for a bit, so it would be of interest to learn. Let's see here. Let me go ahead and pull it up. Do you have voice pick codes built into your current label designs? We have a couple of different options this time. We have yes, no, unsure, and then not applicable. Now, if you do choose not applicable, remember that as support continues to grow for the PTI, it could very rapidly become applicable. So it's certainly important to prepare either way. Now, give it a second here as results continue to pour in a little bit here. All right. Looks like we got a decent sampling here, so I'm going to go ahead and close things out and show everyone the results. All right, so a lot of no's, a couple unsure's, and a couple people saying yes, but for the most part, it's pretty strongly no. And that's also not all that surprising, due to the relative lack of resources that have been out there for even adding voice pick codes to labels. It's not that surprising that not that many people are doing that. That compounded with the little attention that's been drawn to not just the PTI, but even more specifically voice pick codes, it's not surprising at all. That's really likely to change, and it's really great to see all you here, looking to prepare and learn a bit more about them. So, all right, let's hide that away. Okay, great. Now, being with TEKLYNX, I'd like to take a moment to go over an example of a PTI compliant label. Now what you see here is an example of the new PTI compliant label design that Walmart is requiring. This label was created in our CodeSoft software, and it's actually available as a free download for both CodeSoft and LabelView on the TEKLYNX website. Now, the first thing that really jumps out at us here is that voice pick code in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. That's that black box with the white text that really stands out for you. It's that 4-digit number that's really a calculation that's a result of the GTIN information, the lot or batch number, and the pack or sell by date, all of which are actually listed on this label in human readable form, which is a requirement. You can see the GTIN and the batch or lot number right up underneath the barcode there. And then the pack date is actually listed right above the voice pick code there. That's that June 25th in that black bordered white box. So in addition to that, of course, we got the barcode up at the top. That's that GS1 128 barcode standard, and those are that barcode is made up of course, the information right below it, that GTIN information, and then that lot or batch number right next to it. And then, we see a whole array of other human-readable information on here, things like the commodity or variety, the weight, the grade, the country of origin, packer information, supplier information, and even a tracking number. This is not information that's actually required by the PTI, but it is information that's required by Walmart. And you're going to see that a lot with any of your buyers. You're going to have the requirements of the PTI on the label, but then you're also going to have the requirements that this specific buyer is demanding, and Walmart sees a need to have this information on there so it's easy to quickly reference. So expect that. Expect to see those components we discussed as requirements, and then some additional items. Now, you might notice if you look closer, there's some blue outlines around some of these fields here, and that's because this is literally a screenshot pulled right from our CodeSoft software, the software it was designed in. And those little borders are an indication in the software that they are variable fields, meaning they can reference some sort of external changing information. And that's a real key point. If you have something like a database or some other external information, it's easy to integrate that into the label, pull that information in. So instead of maintaining or even creating hundreds of labels, you can create one label design, or maybe just a handful of label designs, and connect them to this wealth of information that you might have already in a database somewhere. That way, it makes it a lot easier to not only create but then maintain those, because we all know Walmart is very likely to change their mind at some point in the future. And rather than having to go through all of your labels and change all of them, you can just change one or two because they're all referencing that database. In addition, if you have something like a supplier-hosted network or something along those lines, easy to pull data from and send data to those those types of networks. So, all right. With that said, as I had promised, I have Dean coming up next here to talk a bit more about hardware. I guess with that, I can go ahead and hand it over to you, Dean. So it's all yours.
All right, Dave, thank you very much for the introduction, and I want to thank everybody for attending this webinar. I think it's key for everybody to understand what's really necessary going forward. So again, my name's Dean Ludwig. I'm from Zebra. Most of you know us relative to printers, but there's a few other areas I'll talk about as well relative to the hardware. So the first thing that, not necessarily from a GTIN perspective, but the first thing you're going to need is some sort of labeling capability out in the field. And it could do everything from labeling, at the picking point or along the supply chain, getting to the consolidation areas or the cooling rooms. It doesn't necessarily, these printers don't necessarily print the GTIN label itself, but they probably would print some material that would be useful going forward to identify the product so the G10 label becomes an easier task. The mobile printers that we carry are everything from a 2-inch to 4-inch width. They are very robust from a drop perspective because you have to consider relative to where these things are being used. They'll be set on top of tractors or pallets or anything like that, which could create some real problems when they drop. But these things have been very proven out in the field to withstand those sort of environments. The other critical area that the printers need to withstand is really the temperature range. And considering where crops may be and the temperature variations that happen out there, it's critical that you have a product that can print in those environments reliably and along the entire day, so you're not stopping picking or anything like that due to the fact the printer is stopped. So that's really one of the two main aspects of the mobile printing. The last thing from a mobile perspective is we also carry a thermal transfer. Most of the product is direct thermal, which for those of you who don't understand the technology is really just like the old fax machines. And it usually is fine for most labels needed in a supply chain, but every once in a while you may need a more durable label. So using thermal transfer technology, which uses a ribbon to put down the print, allows for a much longer and highly durable label that you can use for other areas going forward. So along with the mobile printers, we also have tabletop or stationary printers. These are mainly used in the consolidation centers where batches of labels are usually printed at the end of the harvest day or brought in for final packaging and processing. These printers are specifically designed for the harsh environments in the cool rooms with all the dirt and dust and let's say other things that could be flying around in the air. They're made for non-stop printing, which is critical when you start thinking about the consolidation areas and what you're doing there. Generally, you want to consider it maybe just even a production line where you're taking batches of product and produce and repackaging in a smaller or let's say consumable type packaging. And at that point in time, it's really a production line that needs a printer that can handle that many labels. So the stationary printers are specifically designed to do that. A typical use case is coming in the back door in let's say a large bin that maybe has an identification label on it to tell us when it was picked and where in the field it was picked, and then broken down into the consumer packaging. Another use for the stationary printers relative to these areas is potentially just printing batches of labels where maybe you have hundreds of packages or hundreds of pallets coming in and you want to print a batch of labels and then go out and just basically tag each box or each pallet separately with a, let's say, even identical label. So that, because of the speed of those products or the stationary products, the print speed, that works out very well. There's also capability relative, and you can see the RFID capability, which is called short for radio frequency identification. This capability is important in several respects because it doesn't use line of sight to identify things. So in other words, you don't need a barcode scanner, you need a different type of scanner. But the capabilities are that you can have a pallet of packages, let's say 100 packages in a pallet, and be able to scan that pallet and identify every single one of those packages. Some of it that we found critical as far as use cases are even those temporary packs I referred to earlier, where maybe you identify each one of those and you set up a system where as the temporary package comes into the center, you identify it through a door or something. So again, you're not scanning it per se with a barcode scanner. That way you keep track of all the temporary packages and move things along. So it's not directly related to G10, but you could use it relative to just tracking along the supply chain, which could be very helpful. So another aspect that we have, and again, I know Zebra is pretty well known from a printing perspective, but we've teamed up with a partner to create this real-time condition monitoring system. The system can monitor, oops, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong slide. Go. Sorry, guys. I must have clicked too many times. Okay. So the system that we have basically allows for monitoring temperature, humidity, and many other elements, including gases, to determine ripeness. And the reason I'm bringing this up is not necessarily, again, for the G10 initiative directly, but think about a perspective where your shipment is going from California to North Carolina, and as you're running through Phoenix, all of a sudden the real-time monitoring tells you that you've over-temped. So you may be able to divert that product to somewhere near Phoenix to allow for maybe several more days of shelf life. And, you know, if you have hundreds of trucks running around, tracking this could be a real problem as you're diverting things. But again, with the consistency of the G10 initiative, that could really help in tracking things down. And it, you know, with this system ensures that the product is getting there at its peak of ripeness and freshness, and it's a safe product. So another product we have is what we call IQ Color. Now again, this isn't a mandatory initiative, but it may be something, again, in your supply chain that makes a lot of sense for you to do. Keeping, let's say, various colors for pick days. So Monday is blue, Tuesday is red, whatever. It gives you a much better sense and an easy way to visually identify that product. Now, this product is used mainly through direct thermal printing, so there's no ink or anything like that relative to printing this. It's embedded into the label itself, so you have a real chance to create some color with your current printing. So lastly but not least, just want to go over a few other assorted things. The printer's interfacing, especially out in the field, obviously you can't use wired, so we need wireless technology, which Zebra, due to their mobile printing, has been a leader in the field for. So there's quite a bit of expertise there, and it allows for communicating to virtually any one of our printers, since the stationary printers also have wireless capabilities. So as you can see in some of these pictures, the stationary printers have been, I guess I'd say, modified to allow for use out in the field. And sometimes these are necessary due to the fact that you need, let's say, a batch of labels being printed out in the field because you're changing jobs midday and you need to now print a batch of strawberry labels versus lemon labels or something. So, and again, as I referred to earlier, the extreme temps come into play as well, and there's certain things that people have done to try to minimize the effect of the temperature on the printer itself. So, in wrapping up, I just want to outline that Zebra does provide, you know, many of, if not all of the hardware tools necessary to meet the basic G10 requirements, along with some additional capabilities that can drive everything from efficiencies to savings and saving you as a vendor or saving the consumer money and time, and making sure that everybody's getting the freshest and safest produce. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Amy to discuss some of the consumables along with this.
Great. Thank you, Dean. Now that we've touched on the software and the hardware and the importance of choosing the right labeling solution, as you prepare for the PTI, you also need to choose the right type of label. Which label is going to be best for you and ensure that you will be compliant? There are many things to take into consideration, but you can start with the type of container you will be labeling. Keep in mind the PTI is focused only at case level tracking, So in this instance, the term case is just the physical enclosure in which your product is shipped, and they're commonly boxes, returnable plastic containers, or RPCs, bins, bags, and totes. Next, you need to determine the type of label or tag material you will use. Paper works in most instances, but sometimes when added durability is required, a synthetic material such as a polypropylene or maybe a polyester even can be a better choice. Both paper and synthetic materials can be imaged using either a direct thermal or thermal transfer printer. Direct thermal uses only heat to create your barcodes and text, and is a good choice for short-term labeling where the label is not going to be exposed to any harsh environments, heat, or UV light. Thermal transfer printing, on the other hand, does use a ribbon for imaging, and it offers many more material options for labels that must withstand some potential abrasion and some additional environmental factors. Adhesives are another prime consideration, at least if you want your label to stick. There are a wide variety of adhesives available to address the conditions that most produce companies' products travel in. For instance, there are adhesives engineered to perform in heavy condensation environments that will meet the FDA's requirements for direct or indirect food contact, and that will bond to most packaging when applied at temperatures as low as 0 degrees, such as in your freezer or your coolers. Another situation that I've seen in the produce industry is the use of waxy coated cardboard cases. These require a slightly more aggressive adhesive, and there are adhesives designed specifically to address this. With tags, there's no adhesive, so you just need to consider another method of attachment, such as a plastic pouch, maybe, that's used on a returnable container. Let's look at this specific example from PTI's Best Practices for Case Labels. They recommend a synthetic or coated face stock that will perform in wet conditions, a water-soluble adhesive that should release at 140-degree water temperatures, and these just help to ensure that print quality and barcode scannability are maintained through the entire supply chain, but then the label can also be easily washed off when it gets to the sanitizing station of an RPC pooler. I know this probably seems like a lot of technical details just to get a label, but not to worry. These are the things that your label converter or supplier should be very familiar with. We work with these on a daily basis. So as long as you know the basics of how your product travels through the supply chain and you can convey that information to us, we can help you select the label or tag that will allow you to be compliant with the PTI. To help you easily convey this information to your solution or label provider, we have a simple checklist or a form that we provide to our customers. It's called the Supplies Press Sheet. And I'm just going to quickly go over it with you, kind of recapping some of the information we covered in the last slide. So press is literally just refers to the printing press that the labels are produced on. So starting with P, it's just the printer. We need to know which specific make and model you will be using, a Zebra 110 XI4, for example. What level of resistance is required? Will the label be exposed to mild detergents in a washdown station, for instance? And what environment will it exist? Where is that label going to live? Is it going to be applied in a cooler and then exposed to moisture? What surface will it need to adhere? I used the waxy coated corrugate case in my earlier example, but it could also be a textured plastic surface as well, and these details do make a difference. What size label do you need? Maybe a standard 4x6 shipping label or a 4x2 carton label. And lastly, you need to understand how long the label is going to last. Any special features such as a perforation between labels, and how many labels are you going to use over a specific period of time. With this information, you are on your way to getting a label that will work for you. Now that you've heard about the components required to be PTI compliant, the hardware, the software, and the supplies, you may be wondering, how do I go about implementing this entire solution? You're in the produce business, not labeling or IT, right? And you may have limited resources. This probably sounds like a lot to accomplish and may be a bit overwhelming, so we recommend that you choose a systems integrator or a full solutions provider to help you. Lowry has a full professional services team dedicated to helping our customers get up and running. Some of these services include installation, training, and label design. We can install and set up your printers along with the label software, and then we can also configure everything to work properly. We can train your users in the proper operation of the printers and the use of the label software, and if you don't have the resources available, we can even create your label files and your formats to ensure that they are compliant. To keep your system running, we also offer ongoing maintenance and support either on-site or through a technical call center. So before we continue, let's stop for a second, and I'm going to go ahead and pull up our final polling question for you. And let's see if I can get this up here. What areas of the labeling process has your company started to implement the PTI? Please go ahead and select the ones that best represent your current situation. Your options are software, hardware, media, meaning the labels, or none, we've not yet started. Okay, it looks like pretty much everyone has answered here. Let me go ahead and pull up the results for you. Well, it's pretty split, but actually it looks like the majority of you here still have some work to do. And as Dave said earlier, that's not really surprising, and it's certainly okay. We would love to help you take the next steps toward becoming fully compliant. So with that, let's go ahead and talk about the risks if you don't comply. What could that mean for your organization? Well, if you're a supplier to Walmart or to Sam's Club, the answer is easy. Your shipments may be rejected as of January 1st, 2014. Walmart's letter to suppliers addressing their requirements is published, and it can be found on producetraceability.org for more information. If you are not a supplier to Walmart, understand that their initiative is pushing other retailers to follow suit, and eventually you will want to be compliant in order to ensure there are no disruptions in your supply chain. And finally, there is always public perception to take into consideration, and the importance of the consumer's confidence in the safety of your products. So today we've discussed what you need to do to prepare for PTI, all of the pieces of a possible PTI solution, and the risks if you don't comply. With produce suppliers reporting an estimated 6 months to changeover, it makes sense to get started as soon as possible on the implementation process. So with that, we're pretty much at the end of our presentation, but we do have some time left to answer some of the questions that have been coming in. So let me go ahead and take a look at what you've submitted so far. And okay, it looks like the first one is, my labels have G10s. Do I need voice pick codes? Dave, I think this is a good one for you. Do you mind going ahead and answering that for us?
Sure thing. Voice pick codes are a component of the PTI, and they are used in, as we had mentioned, voice pick inventory systems. So they're, unless your supplier is demanding it, or unless you personally want to comply with all the requirements of the PTI, or the Produce Traceability Initiative, you don't actually have to have them. The PTI is, in fact, an initiative, not a regulation. So there's nothing out there requiring you to do anything outside of maybe your buyer. The need to have a voice pick code will be driven by your buyer or your own, your own initiative. There's nothing out there requiring you to do it. No.
Okay, great. The next question says, I don't supply to Walmart or Sam's Club. Do I have to comply with PTI? Dave, you touched on this a little bit earlier in the presentation. Did you want to go ahead and expand on that a little bit?
Sure. This is, a little, I guess, sort of an extension of the last question that was asked. It isn't it isn't a regulation. It's nothing out there that's being required by anyone to adhere to. The fact that Walmart has gotten on board does mean that there will be more and more suppliers out there following suit, and if you're not a supplier to Walmart, you are likely a supplier to one of those buyers that are going to follow suit, follow right behind Walmart. So, you know, again, it's not something that's required, but it doesn't hurt to get on board before it's too late and you find yourself behind the in the game. So it's worthwhile getting in there and really getting involved in the initiative and adhering to it, just so you don't end up trying to play catch up when a supplier demands it. So.
Okay, great. Thanks again, Dave.
Mm-hmm.
Here's another question that I have. I think, Dean, you'll be able to answer this one. The question says, what printers does Zebra offer that have color options? Dean?
Yeah, thanks, Amy. Yeah, essentially the color that we talked about is called IQ color, which is imaged on the label itself. So there is no real change necessary to your product. So virtually any printer that Zebra offers will be able to print the sortation color of IQ color.
Okay, great. So the color is built into the label, not really an option on the printer, but it's built into the label.
Right.
Okay, thank you, Dean. I have another question here from Linda, and Linda is asking, I am a small supplier and need a cost-effective solution. Do you have one? Yes, we absolutely do. Not only does Lowry offer full enterprise solutions, but we have low cost of entry solutions, with one option being subscription services. I guess at the end of the day, it's really going to come down to each individual organization's requirements, but we can certainly work with you to determine a solution that's going to be cost effective for you. Okay, well, we've got a lot of great questions here. And as I look at them, I think there's a few more remaining that are going to require a bit more time than we have to answer today. So in the essence of time, we're going to go ahead and answer those offline via email. Thanks again to everyone who has submitted those. Again, I am Amy Morasso, and my contact information is included here. So please feel free to email me directly with any additional questions you may think of. Your time today is greatly appreciated, as well as the opportunity to share with you additional information on the PTI. We look forward to working with you in the future. Please take a minute as you are exiting the presentation to complete the short survey and let us know how we are doing. Thank you.